Melanie Carter never imagined her life would unravel because of the person she once called her sister. She and Lydia Morton had been inseparable since high school, two kids who planned their futures sitting on the hood of Melanie's beat-up car, feet dangling as they dreamed about adulthood. Lydia had always wanted to be a mother more than anything, and when Grace was born, she glowed like someone who'd finally stepped into her purpose. For years, Grace and Melanie's daughter Ava grew up like siblings. Weekend sleepovers, birthday parties, school plays. There wasn't a memory from their childhood that didn't include both girls. Even as teenagers, they remained close in a world where friendships often fractured. Grace stayed at the Carter home so often that Lydia jokingly referred to Melanie as her co-parent. It used to feel flattering. Now it felt like a warning she'd ignored. When Grace was 15, Lydia asked Melanie for a favor. "Just a week," Lydia said, twirling her sunglasses as she loaded luggage into her car. "I booked a solo trip to Bali. I need the reset." Melanie didn't question it. Lydia traveled often, and Grace practically lived at their house. The first 2 days were normal: movies, junk food, whisper-filled late nights, but the third day unraveled everything. It was dinner time when Melanie realized she hadn't heard Grace come downstairs. Ava, sprawled on the couch doing homework, shrugged when Melanie asked. "She was upstairs after lunch. I figured she was napping." Melanie climbed the stairs calling Grace's name. No response. She knocked. Silence. Then she tried the knob and felt it resist. Locked. Grace never locked her door. Melanie's pulse settled in her throat as she retrieved the key from the hallway drawer. She opened the door and froze. Grace lay across the bed, pale, barely breathing. Empty pill bottles littered the comforter. A folded note sat beside her hand. Melanie's scream never fully formed. Instead, her body acted on instinct. She dialed by one with shaking fingers while shouting for Ava. The paramedics arrived quickly. The minutes felt eternal. Melanie fielded questions through tears, trying to keep her voice steady, trying to keep Ava from panicking as neighbors stepped in to watch her. On the ambulance ride, Melanie called Lydia. She expected panic. She expected fear. A mother's instinct kicking in so hard she'd be on the next flight home. Instead, Lydia hesitated. "Is it really that serious?" she asked. Melanie's stomach twisted. "She took pills, Lydia. She's barely breathing." Lydia let out a sharp breath. "Maybe she's just trying to get attention. Teenagers do that." Melanie nearly dropped the phone. "She needs her mother," she whispered. Lydia sighed again. "I'll look into flights, but changing tickets is expensive." Expensive. As if $200 outweighed a child's life. Grace was rushed into emergency treatment. Doctors were quickly explaining she'd had her stomach pumped and monitoring through the night. Melanie texted Lydia the moment there was news. The reply chilled her. "You don't need to go every day. Nurses are there for that." Melanie stared at the screen until her vision blurred. She didn't know if she wanted to cry or throw the phone. The next 3 days blurred together as she stayed by Grace's bedside, sleeping in an uncomfortable hospital chair. One night, Grace woke up crying softly. "She doesn't want me. Mom doesn't care." Melanie gathered her trembling hand. "That's not true," she said, but inside she wasn't sure anymore. When Grace was discharged, Melanie prepared a safe room for her at their house. Fresh bedding, soft lights, a sense of comfort she desperately needed. She kept getting Lydia updates, but Lydia's replies grew increasingly cold, her social media filled with sunlit vacation selfies captioned, "Living my best life." The devoted mother Lydia used to be was gone. Or maybe she'd never existed. Lydia finally returned a full day after landing. Tan, relaxed, and wearing sunglasses even indoors. She gave Grace a brief, awkward hug before asking about her missing luggage tags. Melanie tried explaining the discharge plan, therapy, rest, slow reintegration, but Lydia's expression shifted. Her jaw tightened, her eyes narrow. "You've completely overstepped," she snapped. "You're trying to parent my daughter behind my back." Melanie stared at her. "She nearly died." Lydia rolled her eyes. "It was probably for attention." A choked sob came from the hallway. Grace stood there, tears streaming down her cheeks. Lydia barely looked at her. Melanie's patience snapped. "You chose beach over your daughter's life." "Teenagers are dramatic," Lydia said, waving a hand. That was the moment their lifelong friendship was fractured beyond repair. Grace retreated to the bathroom and locked the door. Sobbing, Lydia demanded she come out, then turned her fury on Melanie. "You're trying to take her from me. You're obsessed. You're kidnapping her." Melanie froze. "What?" But Lydia was already dialing 911. "Call them," Melanie said, her voice shaking. "Let's see what they think about a mother who refused to come home after her child attempted suicide." Lydia stormed outside. 20 minutes later, she returned with 2 police officers, her expression triumphant. The officers quickly sensed the truth. They listened as Melanie handed over discharge papers and explained the timeline. Careful, factual. Lydia kept interrupting, accusing Melanie of poisoning Grace against her, painting herself as a victim. "Where's the minor?" the male officer asked. "In the bathroom," Melanie said. "She's afraid to go with her mother." The female officer, Officer Rivera, asked gently, "May I try speaking with her?"
Grace eventually cracked the door open and stepped out, face tear-stained and trembling. Lydia immediately scolded her for making a scene. The officers exchanged a look. Officer Rivera pulled Grace aside to speak privately. Lydia protested, but the officers insisted. While they talked, Lydia paced the hallway loudly ranting about betrayal and manipulation. Ava quietly filmed everything from the edge of the stairs, unnoticed. CPS was called. When Miss Sandra Lewis arrived, she conducted interviews, reviewed records, and assessed Grace's emotional state. Eventually, she recommended Grace stay somewhere safe for 72 hours while the investigation continued. Lydia seethed, but complied. Barely. As Lydia gathered Grace's things, she whispered venomously in Melanie's ear, "You think you've won. I'll ruin you." She didn't know Ava was recording from the doorway. That night, Melanie called her sister Rebecca, an experienced family attorney, who firmly instructed her to document everything, save every message, record every detail, tell the truth even when others twisted. Within hours, Lydia was online, claiming Melanie kidnapped her child. And Melanie realized she was stepping into the longest, most difficult fight of her life.
The morning sunlight in Ridgeview felt sharper than usual, almost intrusive. Melanie barely slept, haunted by the sound of Lydia pounding on her door, the threat in her voice, and the panic in Grace's eyes. The 72-hour CPS hold was only halfway through, and each hour stretched endlessly. Ava tried to keep Grace distracted with movies and silly memes, but the girl flinched at every unexpected sound. Melanie wished she could shield her from everything, but the storm outside their walls was intensifying. By the next morning, Melanie's phone buzzed nonstop. Mutual friends messaged conflicting things. "What happened? I saw Lydia's post. Is it true Grace's overdose was accidental? Lydia said you manipulated her daughter. Ignore her. We know you'd never hurt Grace." It felt surreal. Just days before, Lydia had been bragging about her Bali itinerary, and Melanie was packing lunches for two teens who giggled over inside jokes. Now Melanie was being painted as an unstable woman trying to steal someone's child. Her sister Rebecca arrived early, confident, professional, and fully prepared for the legal chaos. She set up her laptop at Melanie's dining table, organizing screenshots, timestamps, and video clips Ava had recorded. "You did the right things," Rebecca said, scanning through the evidence. "Now we prepare for a custody hearing. Lydia's attorney is already filing motions." "Already?" Melanie rubbed her temples. "She didn't even visit Grace in the hospital?" "Doesn't matter," Rebecca said calmly. "Biological parents get automatic leverage in the system. We're fighting uphill." Grace overheard and grew pale. "Does that mean," she said, "they're going to send me back?" Melanie knelt beside her. "Not if I can help it," she said. Rebecca added, "The court cares about what's safest. Be honest. That's all you need to do." The next morning, Miss Sandra Lewis returned for a follow-up evaluation. She spent time with Grace privately, then sat with Melanie and her husband Daniel in the living room. "Based on what I've seen so far," Ms. Lewis said gently, "I'm recommending temporary guardianship remain with you. But Lydia is hiring an aggressive attorney and a judge will want to review everything. There will be a hearing tomorrow." Melanie exhaled shakily. Tomorrow. Everything hinged on tomorrow. A text from Lydia arrived minutes later. "Hope you enjoyed playing mommy. See you in court." A threat wrapped in sarcasm. That night felt endless. Grace paced the hallway, too anxious to sleep. Eva sat with her on the floor, holding her hand while Daniel made tea no one touched. Melanie felt helpless, terrified she might lose this child who finally felt safe under her roof. The family court wasn't the grand, echoing hall Melanie imagined from television. It resembled a conference room more than anything, small, beige, and suffocatingly intimate. Lydia was already seated when they entered. Flawless makeup, pristine hair, and a carefully chosen outfit that screamed concerned mother. Her attorney sat beside her in a sleek suit. She didn't look at Melanie, didn't look at Grace. She simply stared ahead, a faint smirk lingering. Grace trembled so hard that Melanie laced her fingers through hers to steady her. Judge Patel entered, an older woman with sharp eyes and a reputation for not tolerating theatrics. She read through the case file quietly while people in the room held their breath. Before proceeding, the judge said, "I would like to speak with the minor privately." Lydia's attorney immediately stood up. "Objection, Mrs. Carter has clearly coached the child." The judge raised one hand sharply. "Sit down." Overruled. Grace followed the judge to her chambers, shoulders tight. Those 15 minutes felt like hours. Lydia's stare burned through Melanie the entire time. When Grace returned, she looked drained, but calmer. Judge Patel adjusted her glasses and spoke. "Based on all evidence, Including my conversation with Grace, I'm recommending temporary guardianship remain with Melanie and Daniel Carter for a period of 30 days while a full assessment is completed. Lydia's gasp echoed through the courtroom. Her attorney tried to object, but the judge continued, Mrs. Morton will have supervised visitation twice a week at Cedar Grove Family Services. Additionally, she must undergo a psychological evaluation and enroll in parenting classes before any adjustment to custody will be considered. Lydia showed up from her seat. This is ridiculous. She's my daughter. The judge's voice hardened. Control yourself, Mrs. Morton, or you will be held in contempt. This arrangement is in Grace's best interest. The ruling was final. Grace broke into tears the moment they exited the courtroom. Not sad tears, but relief so overwhelming she nearly collapsed against Melanie. I don't have to go back, she repeated over and over. For now, Rebecca reminded gently, this is just the first battle. Lydia stormed out, ignoring them entirely. Her attorney followed, trying to catch up with her furious pace. As Melanie guided Grace toward the car, she felt hope flicker. Maybe, just maybe, they could breathe again. But peace lasted less than a week. Lydia began posting daily. Photos of Grace's toddler, dramatic captions like a mother's love is being torn away, claims Melanie manipulated Grace, claims Melanie faked or exaggerated the overdose, claims Grace's father was an abusive deadbeat who suddenly reappeared. Some mutual friends chose sides immediately. Jessica messaged Melanie, I can't believe you did this to her. But others understood the truth, sending messages like, ignore her, everyone who knows you sees through this. But the tension spread. Eva overheard classmates whispering about the kidnapping drama. Grace cried when a former friend commented, maybe she just wants attention. The cruelty cut deep. One morning, at her therapy appointment with Dr. Maya Lin, Grace seemed quieter than usual. While Melanie waited in the lobby, she overheard raised voices. When Grace emerged, her hand shook. There's something I didn't tell anyone, she whispered once they were in the parking lot. Melanie waited, heart pounding. Grace said, I saw messages on my mom's phone. She told her friend Derek that she wishes she could just leave me, that she hates being a mother, that she feels trapped. Melanie's breath caught. Grace continued, I thought she meant it. I thought she didn't want me. So I didn't want to be here anymore. Melanie wrapped her arms around her, feeling the weight of that confession settle like a stone. You're safe now, Melanie murmured. You're safe here. Dr. Lin reported the confession to CPS immediately. Lydia's visitations were postponed pending review. For the first time since the nightmare began, Melanie believed Grace might actually get a chance to healing. The 30-day review approached. Rebecca prepared Melanie the best she could, but nothing could have prepared her for Lydia's next tactic. 2 days before the hearing, Lydia's attorney filed an emergency motion. Grace's biological father was seeking custody, a man named Evan Parker. Melanie stared at the papers, stunned. Lydia told us he abandoned them, she whispered. Rebecca frowned. Something feels off. If Evan is real, we need to hear his side. Grace looked terrified, but gave permission for Rebecca to reach out. What they uncovered would unravel yet another layer of Lydia's lies.
Emotional and creative, just a little bit faster voice than average speed, Evan Parker did not look like the heartless man Lydia had described for years. When his face appeared on the video call Rebecca arranged, he looked shocked, emotional, almost fragile. He had the same green eyes as Grace, the same quiet posture, the same nervous habit of rubbing his thumb over his knuckles. Grace, he said softly, voice cracking, I can't believe I'm finally seeing you. Grace froze. It was as if her entire sense of identity tilted under her. Melanie sat beside her, offering silent support while the Parker family appeared on screen. Evan's aunt Laura and 2 small children peeking curiously from behind her dad. I need to tell you the truth, Evan said. Everything. Melanie resisted the urge to hold Grace's hand. This moment belonged to her. He and Lydia met in college. The relationship had been chaotic, intense, and short-lived. Lydia found out she was pregnant unexpectedly. Evan tried to make it work for 2 years, but Lydia grew increasingly controlling and erratic. They eventually separated, agreeing to co-parent peacefully. For a while it worked, Evan said. I had regular visitation. I paid child support. I loved seeing you, Grace. You were 2 when we split. I took pictures every visit. He held up a worn photo strip of toddler Grace smiling in his arms. Then Lydia got a job in Ridgeview. She moved 3 hours away. She promised to work out a visitation schedule, but she kept canceling. She said, "You were sick, tired, busy." Eventually, she stopped answering my calls. Grace stared at the screen stunned. I hired an attorney back then, but Lydia changed addresses and jobs so often it became impossible to serve her with legal papers. Then I got this cease and desist letter claiming you didn't want to see me, but I was causing you emotional distress. He held up a scan copy. Melanie's jaw clenched. It was classic Lydia, weaponizing legal language to isolate people. I backed off because I didn't want to hurt you, Evan whispered, but I never stopped loving you. Grace let out a tiny broken sound. Evan held up a shoebox filled with envelopes. "These are birthday cards. Every year I wrote one, most came back unopened." Grace's eyes filled with tears. "She kept everything," she whispered. "Every single one," Evan said. Melanie had to look away to keep from crying. When the call ended, Grace disappeared into her room for hours. Melanie let her process. Ava knocked softly a few times, but didn't go in. Even Daniel paused in the hallway, unsure whether to comfort her or give her space. Finally, close to midnight, Grace came downstairs, face blotchy but determined. "I want to meet him," she said, "in person." Rebecca nodded. "I'll arrange it." Evan drove to Ridgeview 2 days later. Grace sat on the porch swing, gripping Melanie's hand so tightly her knuckles whitened. When Evan's car pulled up, he stepped out slowly as though afraid she might run. He didn't reach for her, didn't overwhelm her. He simply said, "Hi, Grace." Grace stared at him for several long seconds, then whispered, "Hi." Slowly, they walked toward each other. Melanie stayed on the porch with Ava, heart pounding as she watched this fragile reunion unfold. Grace and Evan talked for nearly an hour. He showed her baby photos she'd never seen, stories Lydia never told, birthdays at parks, Halloween costumes, little moments frozen in time that Grace had been denied. Laura joined later, warm and kind. Grace's half-siblings, 7-year-old Zoe and 9-year-old Liam, showed her drawings they'd made. It was awkward, emotional, beautiful, and heartbreaking all at once. When they left, Grace hugged Melanie without letting go. "She lied to me," she whispered. "My whole life she lied." Melanie kept her close. "You know the truth now, and you get to decide your future." When the custody hearing resumed 2 weeks later, Evan attended, but not to take Grace away. He only wanted to deport her. Inside the courtroom, Lydia appeared, visibly rattled by his presence. Judge Patel asked, "Mr. Parker, are you seeking custody?" "No, Your Honor," Evan said calmly. "Grace should stay where she feels safe. I only want to rebuild a relationship with my daughter." Lydia's attorney snorted. Of course he's saying that now. But then Evan's sister stepped forward. She had stacks of documents, child support payment records, returned mail, photos of cards, and court filings Lydia had avoided by moving repeatedly. It destroyed Lydia's narrative. But the real shock was yet to come. Derek Powell, Lydia's now ex-boyfriend, entered the courtroom, Lydia's face drained of color. Clearly, she hadn't expected this. "Mrs. Carter didn't ask me to come," Derek clarified. "I came because Grace deserves safety." He testified that Lydia had admitted to hiding Grace from Evan, complained constantly about motherhood, used Grace for social media clout, manipulated stories to make herself appear heroic, said she resented Grace for ruining her life, boasted about winning against Melanie. The courtroom fell silent. Lydia erupted, screaming at Derek, at Evan, at Melanie, until the judge threatened to remove her. When the session ended, Judge Patel issued the ruling. Melanie and Daniel Carter receive extended guardianship, 6 months minimum. Evan Parker receives scheduled visitation rights. Lydia Morton is limited to supervised visits, parenting classes, therapy, and a psychological evaluation mandatory. Lydia swayed on her feet, eyes burning with hatred. As Melanie and Grace walked out, Lydia hissed, "This isn't over. I'll get her back. You'll see." Evan calmly stepped in between them. "Stop, Lydia. This is hurting Grace." She spun toward Melanie again. "You think you're a good mother? You think you're better than me? I'll expose you." Security intervened before she escalated further. Over the next few weeks, Melanie's home became a sanctuary. Grace blossomed slowly, still fragile, but hopeful. She began therapy twice a week, visited Evan's family on weekends, and slowly reintegrated into school. Ava remained her fiercest defender. But Lydia spiraled. She missed 2 supervised visits, then a third. When she finally showed up, she arrived smelling faintly of alcohol and tried taking selfies with Grace for social media. The supervisor ended the visit early. That same day, someone vandalized Melanie's car with the word "thief" carved into the paint. No proof, but the timing wasn't settled. Daniel installed security cameras around their home. Melanie felt uneasy locking the doors at night, knowing Lydia had all-secret key. Grace confessed that she woke up shaking some nights, convinced Lydia would show up in the dark. Still, things seemed to stabilize until the next wave hit like a tsunami. Grace came from school pale as a ghost. Her hands shook as she held out her phone. Hundreds of anonymous messages. "Liar! Drama queen! Do it right this time! Finish what you started!" Melanie's stomach twisted violently. They filed a report with the police, who traced the burn-off to a convenience store near Lydia's apartment. Security footage showed Lydia buying it. Her harassment now crossed into criminal behavior. Lydia was arrested, briefly detained, and charged with harassment and violating court orders. Grace cried in Melanie's arms that night, not from fear, but from relief. "Maybe now it'll stop," she whispered. Melanie wished she could promise that. But with Lydia, peace never lasted long.
For a short while, life in Ridgeview shifted into something resembling peace. Grace's nightmares eased, Ava laughed more, even Melanie finally slept full nights without jolting awake at every small noise. But deep down, she knew Lydia's chaos always came in cycles. Quiet never meant safe. Grace continued therapy twice weekly at Willow Creek Counseling Center. Dr. Lynn noticed remarkable progress and commented that Grace was slowly reclaiming her confidence. Grace even joined an after-school art group for teens coping with anxiety and trauma. She spoke more openly, smiled more, and began planning for things beyond survival. Things like school projects, weekend visits with Evan's family in Silverton, and future colleges. But Lydia didn't stay silent for long. One cold January afternoon, after winter break, Grace walked from the front door with an expression Melanie hadn't seen in months. Shock, fear, anger, all pressed together. "Melanie," she whispered, holding up her phone, "you need to see this." Lydia had created a Facebook group titled Mothers Against Parental Alienation, Justice for Lydia and Grace. The group had hundreds of members already, mostly angry parents eager to rally behind any story that painted a mother as a victim. Lydia posted daily. Doctored screenshots, long emotional rants, claims Melanie brainwashed Grace, allegations of kidnapping, photos of Grace without permission, even a picture taken during Grace's hospital stay. "How did she even get these?" Grace asked, voice trembling. Melanie's hands curled into fists. Lydia must have dug up old files or begged hospital staff for access. She wasn't allowed. Melanie called Rebecca immediately. "This violates the restraining order," Rebecca said. "We're filing another complaint." But damage spreads faster than justice. Grace received messages from people in the group. "You're being manipulated. Your mother loves you. Why are you lying about her?" Some of them were kids from Grace's old neighborhood whose parents blindly supported Lydia. Grace locked herself in the bathroom and cried. Ava sat outside the door trying to coax her out, whispering comforting words through tears of her own. A few days later, Melanie received a message from Marissa, one of Lydia's supporters. "Can we talk privately? I think something is wrong." Melanie agreed to meet her at a coffee shop, unsure if this was a trap. Marissa arrived looking guilty, her eyes shattered with regret. "I joined Lydia's group because she sounded so desperate, but then something felt off. Her stories kept changing. She said Grace was hospitalized for an allergy reaction, then for a panic attack, then claimed it was a routine checkup. Too many versions." Melanie nodded cautiously. "So I looked up court records," Marissa said, continued. "What she's posting doesn't match anything." She slid a small folder across the table. Inside were screenshots of Lydia manipulating group members, instructing them to target Grace's social media accounts and threatening to expose Melanie publicly. "I'm done helping her, and I think others will be too." Within 48 hours, Lydia's group imploded. Members confronted her, several posted public apologies to Grace. Lydia deleted the entire group, but a day of silence was the most Melanie got. The school counselor at Ridgeview High School called Melanie one evening, sounding unsettled. "Is this about Grace's attendance?" Melanie asked. "No," the counselor said. "It's about Lydia." Melanie's heart plummeted. According to the staff, Lydia emailed every one of Grace's teachers demanding academic updates, assignment details, seating charts, reports on Grace's behavior. This violated both court orders and privacy laws. When denied access, Lydia began showing up at the school office, insisting she had rights. Security had to remove her twice. Grace shook all over when Melanie told her. "She's everywhere," Grace said. "She won't stop." Melanie wrapped her arms. "You're safe. You are." The school issued a building-wide alert banning Lydia from campus. Dr. Lynn called Melanie when eating, sounding unsettled. "Melanie, I need to let you know that Lydia somehow obtained my professional email address and sent me a lengthy message accusing Grace of manipulating everyone around her." Melanie closed her eyes. "She accused you as well," Dr. Lynn added gently, "and implied I was biased due to my anti-mother agenda. I reported her email to the court." Grace cried when she heard, and she was trying to destroy every person who helps me. Why? Why can't you just love me?" Melanie wished she could answer. Ava had been Grace's rock for months, shielding her from cool rumors and standing up to bullies, but the weight grew heavy. One afternoon, Melanie found Ava crying quietly in her room. "What happened?" Melanie asked. "People at school are saying Grace made everything up. Some parents think we're a bad influence. They think we're troubled." Melanie Sebas had her brushing up from her face. "I'm so tired of people believing Lydia," Ava whispered through tears. "Grace almost died. Why isn't that enough?" Melanie had no good answer, only a hug. Sensing the emotional strain, Evan offered to adjust his work schedule. "I can take Fridays off," he said. "I'll help with pickup, therapy appointments, whatever you need." Laura chopped off more meals, so he made Grace friendship bracelets, and Liam taught Ava card game to distract her. "We're family now," Laura said simply. "Family helps." Melanie nearly cried from gratitude. For the first time in a long time, she didn't feel alone. Just as life seemed manageable, Grace received a new wave of messages. Dozens of text threats from unknown numbers. "Liar. Everyone knows what you did. Do it again. Finish it this time." Grace broke down, shaking violently as she clutched her phone. Melanie called the police immediately. The investigation revealed the messages came from another burner phone purchased, once again, near Lydia's apartment. Gas station security footage captured Lydia wearing a baseball cap, unmistakably buying it. At the visitation review hearing, Rebecca presented the evidence. Lydia's attorney argued it wasn't proof she sent the messages. Judge Patel raised a brow.
Mrs. Morton, do you expect this court to believe he purchased disposable phones for any other reason than to evade monitoring? Lydia sounds sketchy enough. Superberg's visitation remained restricted. A full psychological evaluation was ordered. When court adjourned, Lydia's attorney approached Melanie privately. My client claims she's been paying you child support and wants the amount reduced to afford therapy sessions. Melanie stared at him. I've never received a single dollar from Lydia. The attorney blinked, stunned. You haven't? Check the records. He did. Lydia had lied to her own legal counsel. After the next supervised visit, Grace sat rigidly in her bedroom staring at her wall. We talked about normal stuff today. She brought my old picture books. She smiled a lot. That's good, Melanie said cautiously. Grace swallowed hard, but when the supervisor stepped out to answer a phone call, Mom leaned in close and whispered. Grace's voice cracked. What did she say? She said I'll regret betraying her and that I'll come to my senses soon. Melanie's blood ran cold. You didn't tell the supervisor? Grace shook her head no. It would have been my word against her. She smiled the whole time, like she was saying something sweet. Dr. Lynn advised Grace to document every memory, threat, incident, and manipulative pattern, past and present, for court. Grace tried, but writing about her mother triggered panic attacks. Melanie and Ava set up a system where they sat nearby while Grace wrote in small increments. The memories that emerged painted a horrifying picture. Sabotaging Grace's friendships, isolating her from Evan, telling Grace friends talked behind her back, manipulating school staff, using Grace for emotional validation, withholding affection as punishment, guilt-tripping, love-bombing, cold rejection cycles. It was a pattern far deeper than Melanie had realized. When Lydia's court-ordered evaluation was finally completed, her attorney immediately tried to have it sealed. The judge denied the motion. The unsealed parts were alarming. Narcissistic traits, poor empathy, unstable perception of reality. Treating Grace as an extension, not as a person, high risk of emotional harm. The psychologist strongly advised against unsupervised contact. Lydia fired her attorney on the spot and claimed the evaluator was anti-mother. The court appointed Morgan Hale, a seasoned guardian ad litem known for her fairness. She interviewed everyone, teachers, therapists, neighbors, Edmund's family, Melange's family, and Grace herself. She also met with Lydia for over 2 hours. Grace worried Morgan might fall for her performance. She was acting like the world's best mom. She had never heard anyone, Grace said, Melanie felt a stomach twist. But then unexpected reinforcements arrived. Patricia, another old friend of Lydia's, came forward. Lydia asked me to lie to the guardian. She told me exactly what to say, specific moments to pretend I witnessed, but it was all fake. I can't be part of this anymore. She provided a sworn statement. Then Derek reached out to Eben again, offering additional screenshots of Lydia bragging about manipulating social media and punishing Grace for choosing Melanie. The case was now unmistakable. Morgan's final report would determine the next chapter of Grace's life.
Morgan Hale, the guardian ad litem assigned to Grace's case, was known in Ridgeview for being precise, perceptive, and impossible to manipulate. A former social worker and attorney, she had a reputation for seeing straight through performances, lies, and emotional theatrics. Lydia, of course, had no idea who she was dealing with. The report from Morgan would change everything. Morgan visited Melanie's home twice, taking note of everything with quiet professionalism: Grace's routine, the family's communication style, their safety measures, the stability of the household. She observed Grace interacting with Ava and Daniel, watched her do homework at the kitchen island, and asked thoughtful, gentle questions about her life. Grace answered honestly. Sometimes she cried, sometimes she laughed, sometimes she stumbled over memories that still hurt. But she didn't try to exaggerate or dramatize. Her truth didn't need embellishment. Morgan noticed. At Lydia's apartment, the tone was starkly different. Lydia proudly displayed meticulously curated photos of trips, awards, and smiling moments with Grace. Photos Melanie suspected Lydia printed solely for the meeting. Lydia blamed Melanie for kidnapping Grace, accused Evan of abandoning her, and claimed everyone was conspiring to make her look unstable. She became combative during questioning, raising her voice, contradicting herself, and insisting that Morgan was, quote, clearly biased when pressed for details. Morgan noticed that too. After interviews, Morgan began contacting every person connected to Grace's life: teachers, counselors, old family friends, and even neighbors from both sides. Patterns emerged quickly. But the most impactful conversation came from an unexpected source. One evening, Melanie's phone rang. It was Derek's ex-girlfriend, Tessa, someone Melanie had never met. Is this Melanie Carter? Yes. You don't know me, but I have information about Lydia. Things you'll want to see. Melanie and Rebecca arranged a meeting in a public cafe. Tessa arrived with a thick folder and a nervous expression. I was with Derek when he dated Lydia. I saw things, the things that scared me. She slid the folder across the table. Inside were screenshots of Lydia talking about manipulating Grace, messages where Lydia admitted driving out of state to avoid court papers from Evan, voice recordings of fights between Lydia and Derek, texts where Lydia bragged about posting fake stories online, confessions about planning to destroy Melanie's reputation. But the worst were the recordings. In one clip, Lydia ranted, "Grace owes me. I gave up everything for her. If she chooses Melanie over me, she deserves whatever happens next." Melanie's stomach twisted painfully as she listened. In another recording, Lydia said, "I'll make Grace regret turning on me. I'll remind her who has control." Rebecca looked horrified. "These will carry weight in court," she said quietly. But Tessa wasn't done yet. "There's something else," she whispered. Lydia told Derek she wished Grace had succeeded because then she wouldn't be held back anymore. Melanie felt her breath leave her body. Grace, sitting nearby, heard the words and curled into herself, trembling. Tessa reached out helplessly. "I'm so sorry. I should have come forward sooner. I didn't realize how bad it had gotten." Melanie pulled Grace into her arms. "You're safe," she whispered fiercely. "You're safe with us." When Morgan received the evidence, she spent nearly 2 hours reviewing it. Then she requested an emergency meeting with Judge Patel. Court was scheduled for the following morning. Melanie barely slept. Grace barely ate. Daniel held Melanie's hand in bed and whispered, "This is the turning point. I feel it." She hoped he was right. The courtroom was unusually tense when Morgan entered with the thick binder. Lydia appeared confident at first, wearing a polished blazer and her trademark concerned mother expression. But the moment Morgan began speaking, Lydia's confidence cracked. "Your Honor," she said calmly, "the evidence I'm about to present raises serious concerns regarding Grace's emotional safety." She laid out a sequence of events: Lydia's social media harassment, attempts to contact Grace through burner phones, violation of school boundaries, interference with therapy, manipulative patterns, and psychological harm. Statements captured in audio recordings. When the recordings played in court, Lydia's eyes widened in horror, then narrowed in rage. "That's taken out of context," she shrieked. Judge Patel slammed her gavel. "Enough." The recordings continued. Lydia grew more frantic with every passing moment. "No one understands what I've been through," she cried. "Chris owes me loyalty. Melanie stole her. Evan abandoned us." Morgan remained steady. "Your Honor, Grace has repeatedly expressed fear of retaliation and emotional manipulation by her mother. Her mental health suffered significantly under Lydia's care. The evidence strongly supports these claims." Then came the final blow. Morgan opened her binder to a psychological assessment summary. "My professional recommendation is that full custody remain with Melanie and Daniel Carter. Additionally, I recommend that Lydia Morton's visitation be suspended indefinitely until she completes long-term therapy and demonstrates substantial improvement." The courtroom gasped. Lydia stood up, pointing at Melanie with shaking hands. "You did this! You poisoned everyone against me!" Judge Patel ordered her to sit or be removed. Then the judge surprised everyone. "Grace," she said gently, "would you like to speak? Only if you're comfortable." Grace looked at Melanie, then at Evan in the back row, and finally at the judge. "Yes," she whispered. She stepped forward slowly, her hands trembling. "My mom," she paused, swallowing hard, "doesn't love me the way a mom is supposed to. She loves control. She loves what I can do for her, not me. Lydia growled. "That's a lie." "This court will be silent," Judge Patel warned. Grace continued. "I tried for years to make her happy. I thought if I was good enough, she'd stop yelling, stop disappearing, stop blaming me for her problems. But she never did." She wiped her cheeks. "I feel safe with the Carters. They listen to me, they care about me, they don't make me feel like a burden." Melanie's chest tightened painfully. "And I want a relationship with my dad," she added quietly. "He never stopped loving me. I want that chance." She took a shaky breath. "I'm tired. I just want to live without being scared." Lydia cried out, a wild, desperate sound, but the judge silenced her. When Grace returned to her seat beside Melanie, Melanie held her tightly, tears slipping down her own cheeks. "You were brave," she whispered. After reviewing all the evidence, Judge Patel issued an interim ruling. Grace will remain with Melanie and Daniel Carter. Evan Paraker is granted expanded visitation. Lydia Morton's visitation is suspended pending further review. A restraining order is placed to prevent Lydia from contacting Grace outside court-approved measures. Lydia must complete a full psychological treatment program before any reconsideration. Lydia collapsed in her chair, sobbing hysterically. Melanie, meanwhile, held Grace as relief washed over them both. This wasn't the final verdict, but it was the clearest sign yet of where the court was heading. On the drive home, Grace stared out the window. "Do you think she'll ever get better?" she asked softly. Melanie hesitated. "I hope she does. But even if she doesn't, you will be okay." Grace leaned her head on Melanie's shoulder. "For the first time, I believe that."
The weeks following the emergency hearing felt strangely light, like a long storm had finally broken, leaving behind cautious calm. Grace still battled anxious thoughts, still flinched at sharp sounds, still had moments where she checked the locks twice before bed. But she laughed more, smiled more, ate without being reminded, slept without nightmares. And Melanie, though exhausted from months of crisis, felt something she hadn't dared feel for a long time: hope. Grace's therapy sessions became more future-focused. Instead of unpacking old trauma, she started exploring identity, goals, dreams. Dr. Lin encouraged her to journal not just pain, but possibilities. Her first entry was simple: "I want to feel normal again." Her second entry was bolder: "I want to choose who I become." Evan continued visiting every weekend. The Parker household embraced Grace with gentle warmth. Zoe begged to braid her hair. Liam challenged her to board games. Laura packed homemade snacks to send home with her. Grace began to bond with them in ways she'd never thought possible. "Dad listens," Grace said one evening, fiddling with her bracelet. "He doesn't try to fix everything. He just sits with me while I talk." Melanie smiled. "You deserve that." But there were still shadows. 3 weeks after the hearing, Rebecca called Melanie with urgent news. "You need to sit down," Melanie said at her kitchen table, heart thudding. The police department received security footage from Ridgeview Pharmacy. Lydia tried purchasing another prepaid phone. The clerk recognized her from the restraining order notice posted in the office and refused service. She became aggressive and threatened him. Melanie closed her eyes. Was Grace threatened again? "No," Rebecca said, "but this violation, it may influence the final ruling." Grace overheard the conversation. Instead of fear, her shoulders sagged with exhaustion. "She'll never stop, will she?" she whispered. Melanie embraced her. "I don't know, but the law will stop her eventually." The final custody hearing took place on a crisp March morning. Grace wore a simple lavender dress, her courage color, Ava called it. Melanie wore a navy blazer. Evan sat behind them for support, hands clasped, eyes steady. Lydia arrived last. She looked drained, hair unstyled, eyeliner smudged, blazer wrinkled. Her attorney, a new one since she'd fired the last, whispered frantic instructions, but she barely listened. Her gaze stayed glued to Grace. The hostility was gone. What remained was something else: desperation mixed with denial. Judge Patel entered, flipping through notes.
We're here to determine a long-term custody arrangement for Grace Morton." Lydia shot up. "She belongs with me. I'm her mother." Her attorney tugged her arm. "Sit." Judge Patel continued calmly. "I reviewed the guardian ad litem report, the psychological assessment, incident evidence, and testimonies." She paused. "This is not a case of alienation, as Mrs. Morton claims. This is a case of emotional instability, boundary violations, and harmful parental behavior." Lydia gasped. Judge Patel proceeded. "Grace is thriving under the care of Melanie and Daniel Carter. Her mental health has improved. Her academic performance has improved. She feels safe. This court must prioritize the child's welfare, not the parent's ego." Lydia shook her head violently. "You're wrong. Melanie manipulated her." "Mrs. Morton?" the judge said sternly. "Enough." Then she issued the ruling that would shape Grace's future. In the matter of custody of Grace Morton, the judge said, voice firm and clear, primary custody is awarded to Melanie and Daniel Carter. Evan Parker is granting regular visitation and the right to petition for joint custody after 1 year. Lydia Morton is granted no visitation at this time. A new psychological evaluation will be required after 6 months to determine if supervised visitation is safe. A long-term restraining order remains in place to protect Grace. Lydia collapsed into her chair, sobbing, repeating the same words over and over. "She's mine! She's mine! She's mine!" Grace squeezed Melanie's hand. "Not anymore," she whispered. "I choose where I belong." In the following months, Grace flourished. She joined the art club full-time, making vibrant paintings of forests, oceans, and stars, images of escape turning into images of possibility. She began tutoring younger students in math. She made new friends. She visited Evan's family every weekend, eventually staying overnight once she felt ready. Laura taught her how to bake cinnamon rolls from scratch. Zoe insisted on matching bracelets. Liam showed her how to skateboard, badly but with enthusiasm. Grace laughed more in those weekends than she had in her entire previous year. Ava remained by her side, loyal and protective. The two girls became closer than ever, sisters in everything but blood. Melanie watched it all with quiet pride. "You're growing into yourself," she told Grace one evening. "Thanks for giving me a second chance." Melanie brushed a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "No, sweetheart, you gave yourself one." 2 months later, a letter arrived addressed to Grace. The handwriting was unfamiliar, steady, elegant. Grace hesitated before opening it. Melanie offered to stay with her while she read. Inside was a message from Lydia's therapist, not Lydia herself. "Grace, your mother has entered a long-term treatment program. She is not permitted to contact you, and this letter is not from her directly. However, she has expressed remorse for her actions and is beginning the slow process of confronting her behavior. This does not require a response. It is only an update on her condition as part of her treatment plan. You are encouraged to continue focusing on your own healing and growth. Your safety and well-being remain the top priority. Dr. Helena Price." Grace folded the letter quietly. "Are you okay?" Melanie asked. Grace nodded. "I am. I just don't feel anything right now." "That's okay," Melanie said gently. "You don't owe her forgiveness or anger or anything." Grace leaned her head against Melanie's shoulder. "I'm happy where I am. That's what matters." Summer approached. Grace turned 16, surrounded by people who loved her. Evan's family, the Carters, Ava, and her new friends. They threw her a backyard party with lanterns, a bonfire, and a vanilla cake topped with lavender frosting. For the first time in years, Grace made a wish that wasn't about survival. "I want to live," she whispered softly before blowing out the candles. Melanie hugged her afterwards. "You already are." As the stars appeared overhead, Grace stood between Melanie and Evan, feeling something warm settle inside her, something she hadn't felt since childhood. One evening near the end of summer, Grace handed Melanie a sealed envelope. "What's this?" Melanie asked. Grace said, "A letter. From me. But please read it later." After Grace went to bed, Melanie opened it. "Melanie, you didn't just save me. You gave me a life I didn't know I was allowed to have. You stood up for me when I couldn't stand up for myself. You believed me when I thought I didn't deserve to be believed. You loved me when I didn't know what love even looked like. I can't ever repay you, but I want you to know this. I choose you.
I choose this family. I choose my future. Thank you for fighting for me. Thank you for being the mom I needed. Grace. Melanie pressed a hand to her mouth, tears streaming freely. Daniel found her crying softly at the dining table. Good tears or bad, she whispered. Good. So good. The next morning, Grace stood in the doorway, school bag slung over her shoulder, face bright with the kind of hope that takes months to rebuild. You ready? Melanie asked. Grace smiled, a real smile, full and steady. Yeah, she said. I'm finally ready. They stepped outside into the warm morning light, towards a future that wasn't shaped by fear, but by choice. A future Grace had reclaimed for herself.